A very warm welcome to all of you and good morning. And thank you so much for joining this event. Just a very brief word from my side before we are going to really start into the issue and to the thematical discussions and inputs. My name is Monika Althaus. I work on children's rights and business at UNICEF Switzerland and Liechtenstein. And together with Alice Harbach-Forel from the UN Global Compact Network in Switzerland and Liechtenstein, we have been in the co-lead for this project, for this study project from the side of our two organizations. Just before we start, some very brief words of on housekeeping. Please mute your microphones. Feel free to turn on your video. It would be nice to see your faces when you ask questions during a Q&A. When you have questions during the presentations, it would be great if you could just write them in the chat. We will see the chat and then take them up afterwards during Q&A. And during Q&A, you can also use the chat or then just raise your hands and then Alice will come back to you to ask your question directly. The event will be recorded, but only until the Q&A session. We will stop the recording before the Q&A. And we will have two brief surveys rather at the end of the event or of the presentations. There, it would be great if you could join and put in what you think on your opinions so that we also learn a bit more from you about your insights. So thank you very much. After this is said, it is really my pleasure to hand over to Bettina Juncker. She is the Executive Director of UNICEF Switzerland and Liechtenstein, and will now take over for some words of welcome and introduction. Bettina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Monika. Ladies and gentlemen, dear partners, dear colleagues, everyone, I would like to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you for today's event. It's a great pleasure to launch this study on addressing children's rights in business. Actually, it's the best moment of my week, so thank you for that. I'm joined today by a number of great speakers, and we will hear from their experiences, from their insights on and around the study. First of all, I would like to mention you, Antonio Hautle, the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. He will set the scene a little bit around the study and the 10 years anniversary of the children's rights and business principles. Antonio will be followed by the three authors of the study, Professor Dorothee Baumann-Pauli, Dr. Berit Krag, and Sarah Kremer. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you here today. You're all from the Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights, and you will present the study and the key insights and results. Then we will hear from Tulia Baldassari. She is from the global logs and lumber company called Interholco, and Erika Favre from MCI Group. Both will share practical insights on their experience working with children's rights related issues. In addition, we have Miriam Aid-Yahya. She is an advisor on international labor affairs at the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO of Switzerland. She will be presenting the current plans for private sector child labor working group in Switzerland. So very exciting also this topic. And last but not least, we will hear from Alice Harbach-Forel of the Global Compact Network Switzerland and Liechtenstein on a workshop which the Global Compact Network is planning now together with UNICEF and Save the Children, also as a follow-up of this study. So, dear speakers, thank you all for being here and being part of this event and make this a great 1.5 hours. In the second part of today's session, as Monika already mentioned, you will have ample time to discuss, to ask questions, clarify points around the study and beyond. And we really hope this event to be an interactive one, and we're very much looking forward to a lively discussion in the second part. So to start with the topic, children's rights in business, we all know it, business has a huge impact on the extent and the way that children can really have access to their rights. Imagine a child just, within its first 18 years of age. When it's a baby, it is impacted by its parents' working condition. Do the parents have parental leave after birth, and for how long? Is it possible for the mother to keep on breastfeeding when taking up work again? And if the child grows as a toddler, exploring the world, and the children are often surrounded by toys or by several materials. Is it an environment they are growing up in that is safe for them? How are companies trying to reach out already to very, very small children with their marketing and advertising activities for toys, for food, and for other goods? And further in a child's life, when it starts school and when the radius of its activities grow, how safe is the environment, and to what extent do businesses grow the contact to them? What kind of impact do companies' operations have on the environment that the child lives and plays in? And of course, we all know it, in some countries, child labor is a key issue affecting children from as young as schooling age already. And finally, as a teenager, many children today spend hours and hours of the day online. How safe is that? How safe are these surrounding also in the digital space for children? And how are children approached and targeted by marketing activities of companies? So these are just a few examples to show how large and how broad the range of impact of companies on children really is. 1/3 of the world's population are children under 18 years. And this gives us a glimpse of the myriad of single interlinkages that companies have with children. We also try to grasp the impacts businesses can have when it comes to children's lives and their rights. And we all know it, with their reach and their leverage, the power companies have, they have an important role to play to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to contribute to finding sustainable solutions. So this is why we are here today. Businesses have, as we just said, the responsibility to respect human and children's rights, as it has been defined by the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights already in 2011. This year, it has been 10 years that another important guidance, namely the Children's Rights and Business Principles, have been developed and published together by UNICEF, the UN Global Compact, and Save the Children. And these children's rights and business principles help companies better understand and live up to their responsibility to respect children's rights. The children's rights and business principles differ, they make a difference between relevant children's rights issues for companies on 3 levels, if you want. The first one is the company as a workplace. There we have topics like child labor, we already said it, but also decent work for parents and young people. On a second level, we have companies as a marketplace. And there we have topics such as product safety or marketing and advertising activities targeting towards children. And lastly, on a third level, we have the community and the environment. And we want to see to what extent companies have an impact on the environment that children are living in. So having said all that, I think it's time for me to stop now. I would love to hand over now to Antonio Hautle, Executive Director of the Global Compact Network, Switzerland and Liechtenstein. But before I do that, let's watch a very, very brief video on the Child Rights and Business Principles, just to celebrate their 10th anniversary. So please, the stage is for the video now. Thank you very much.
10 years ago, a landmark set of principles was developed.
I welcome the launch of the Children's Rights and Business Principles.
Pre 2 godine UNICEF je pokrenuo akciju sa ciljem da definiše principe koje bi kompanije trebalo da poštuju kada su u pitanju deca i njihova prava.
And when I think about sustainability, it's really about ensuring that we leave this world a better place for the next generation.
Building on the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, the CRBP were the first comprehensive set of principles to guide companies on the range of actions they can take to respect children's rights in the workplace, marketplace, and community. The CRBP call on companies everywhere and of all sizes to integrate respect for children's rights into their core business activities, from decisions and strategies to business models and wider sustainability efforts. And they can be used by governments to ensure that business policy and regulation creates an environment that builds that respect. Over the past 10 years, the principles have served as an inspiration for many businesses, regardless of their size, sector, or location. Inspiring action in management suites, farms, and factories, and creating change in law, standards, and practice addressing business impact on children. There is much to celebrate, but much more that needs to be done.
And we are talking more and more about intergenerational justice. We are creating a very, very difficult world for our children and their children and grandchildren.
Achieving sustainable change means holistic action by businesses, investors, and policymakers, with children's rights and children's voices at the center. We need businesses and governments everywhere to play their part. Together, we can make the next 10 years a better decade for every child, everywhere.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bettina. Hello, everyone. From the side of the Young Global Compact Network, Switzerland and Liechtenstein, I'm also very happy to be able to present today this report. It's an important step also in our collaboration with UNICEF on a Swiss-Liechtenstein level. I think it's important that we really enlarge our networks. I have seen colleagues from ÖBU, from other organizations. We have to bring these issues forward together. Just as a reminder, there was a global stock-taking report published by UNICEF, Young Global Compact Global and Save the Children early this year in May, which shows that on a global level in the private sector, we have made progress on integrating children's rights into the business world, into the business operations. But as we all know, we have still a long way to go, and the present geopolitical situation doesn't improve the situation. It's rather a bigger challenge. And that's why we said it's important for us also to collaborate and look where we stand here on a local level. We have seen an evolution in the business world. Sustainability becomes more and more mainstream. But to be honest, also in my perspective, I realized that the children's rights are not really in the focus of many of us. We normally think of child labor, but the holistic approach is still not seen everywhere, and they are oftentimes overlooked. The stock-taking report therefore highlights the importance of children's rights to be named and made visible in businesses and in business conduct and activities everywhere. So based on that, we did this study in Switzerland. And as you may know, the Principle 5 of the UN Global Compact principles explicitly names the part of elimination of child labor. And we want to support companies to do that more effectively. And we think that this study is the base, and it will be very helpful to look what we can do here on a local level to improve and to implement the children's rights along the whole value chains of our participants, but also of the whole business community here in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. The problem is that we are oftentimes lacking information and specific data, not only in this field, but here probably even more, I suppose. And in companies, the awareness is not big enough. We therefore wanted to produce some data and evidence to build on in our work, in our joint work, also within our networks. We are now very happy that we can present you the results of this joint study, and it has been implemented by the Geneva Center for Business and Human Rights and the Children's Rights Center at the University of Geneva. It's also my alma mater. I did my MBA there, and I was at the inauguration of your center, Dorothee. So it was I'm really happy that we could do this collaboration now. The study gives you an overview and insight into the broad range of children's rights issues which are relevant to the business sector here on a local level. And we hope that this study and this session we are having now is going to inspire you and the various stakeholders to do more and renewed exchange, commitment, and business action on children's rights. We are also looking in the second part what that means as next steps, what we can do together. Before I hand over to Dorothee, I would like to thank all of you who are involved. I don't repeat the names. I think it's a great thing that we can do that together, academia and NGO and the business associations and our companies. So thanks a lot. And with that, I hand over to Professor Dorothee Paumann-Pauli. She will present us the main findings of the study. Dorothee, up to you.
Thanks, Antonio, and thanks for your kind introduction and your and Bettina's excellent framing of our research. So at the Geneva Center, the institution that I'm directing, we are focusing on developing business models that align profits and principles. Children's rights are a highly sensitive subset of human rights, and with emerging legislation in Europe, companies need to understand and address their impacts. It was a great pleasure to work with the UNICEF and the UN Global Compact teams over the past 6 months, as well as with our academic partner here at the University of Geneva, the Center for Children's Rights Studies. Carl, Renata, Simon, thanks for the great collaboration. The key findings of our study point to gaps, not in awareness or principled commitment to children's rights, but in knowledge and management tools to address challenges related to children's rights. And at the Geneva Center, we stand ready to support companies to identify, analyze, and remediate children's rights risks related to their business. My colleague, Dr. Berit Knaak, will actually present the key findings of our study. She led this research. She will be supported by my colleague, Sarah Kramer, and two corporate practitioners that generously supported our study with their practical insights. Erika and Tulia, we're most grateful to have you. This is a handover to Berit. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Dorothy. I'm happy to share the research findings with you all today. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone who worked on the project over the last 6 months, including on the project team as research assistants and also for providing guidance. And also we thank all companies who contributed to this study and shared their experiences and their insights through the survey and through the interviews. Now, I will start by introducing the research objectives and how we proceeded with the data collection and analysis. And then I will share the 6 key insights that we found in greater detail. During the presentation of these findings, we will hear from 2 corporate representatives as well. And it's my pleasure to welcome Tulia and Erika. Now, what did we actually look at? First of all, we looked at what is the current understanding of businesses and children's rights in corporate practice? So where do companies see the connection to children in their operations? Secondly, we took a deeper look into the activities that companies undertake in connection with children's rights. And finally, we analyzed what are challenges and opportunities that companies see for advancing children's rights in their value chain. Now, in terms of the methodology, we based our analytical framework on key documents on children's rights. These include the Children's Rights and Business Principles that have the 10-year anniversary this year. Also international conventions and treaties, first and foremost, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and then also on the expert academic literature in this field. Now, to analyze the relation of children's rights to business, we use the corporate value chain to organize the data collection and also to map children's rights in relation to companies' activities. So we looked at both policies and practices across the entire value chain. That includes companies' own operations, for example, family-friendly policies for their employees, but also interns or apprentices or their products and services themselves. The value chain also includes the supplier relationships and the aspects where companies source their raw materials from or pre-processed goods for that matter. And then finally, this also includes the use of the goods and services in the downstream supply chain. So overall, we had over 100 companies that are part in this study. We aimed at conducting a representative study for the Swiss and Liechtenstein context, and we included all major industries. We had very few responses from Liechtenstein, apart from our desk research, and over 1/5 of the companies in the study that are represented are small and medium enterprises. Now, the findings of our research are in this report that we are launching this week and where you can already see visual here. Now, I will go on with the key findings that we observed, taken together from all 3 parts of this research, the desk research, online survey, and the interviews. So when we combine these insights, we have key 6 insights that I will go through in greater detail now in turn. So the first observation that we make is that most companies do not engage specifically with children's rights, but are generally very committed to human rights overall. Now, what does that mean in greater detail? As you can see on the graph on the right, these are the human rights related policies that make an explicit reference to children. Over 1/3 of the supplier codes of conduct that we studied actually have a reference to children in there. However, if we take a closer look almost all of these references relate to child labor only and don't take a broader picture towards children's rights. And this finding is one of the key insights that goes through all our observations of the parts of the study. And it's also reflected in the interviews and the surveys. So we asked companies how they perceive the relevance of children's rights. And the relevance ratings are significantly higher for the upstream value chain compared to the own operations of the downstream. And the interviews reveal that the association that comes to mind first usually includes child labor too. So throughout our research, we did take into consideration that not all companies are exposed to all children's rights equally. So for instance, this could be due to the nature of the products or services or the industry. So for example, a company that operates in the B2B context and say it produces tools or machinery for industrial use might only have a very limited exposure to children in marketing. But other children's rights aspects are more universal. So for example, the majority of companies that we spoke with or heard from through the survey have family-friendly policies such as parental leave or support for childcare, or have specific targets that address the environmental sustainability. So with these topics, we found that in many cases, companies rarely make the connection to children's rights, though explicitly. Now, in the study, we also systematically looked at different aspects of children's rights. And in response to our research objectives, the next two findings will elaborate in greater detail on companies' awareness and activities in relation to children's rights. So the second insight focuses on the policies and practice that companies have established in relation to children's rights. And we find that if we combine all the insights from the study, companies do in fact address several aspects of children's rights. So these cover aspects as diverse as marketing policies, for example, as of which age is it appropriate to market certain products to children, or which lifestyle are you actually promoting with this advertisement. Also, these aspects include product safety or working conditions for interns and apprentices, but we found that companies also often differentiate by age group and look for suitable tasks or working hours and take this into consideration. Now, when we look at how these policies or processes are integrated in corporate practice, we find that many of these aspects that are primarily concerning companies' own operations are closely aligned with legal regulations. So there's not really a specific management of these aspects from a children's point of view, including family-friendly policies, for instance. So yeah, to give you one example, Swiss products have a reputation for applying very strict safety and quality standards, and this also benefits children, of course. So that's more or less a side effect. And this could relate to the safe use of products or also to the use of toxics, which is already taken care of in these policies and might not need additional or might not present additional risks. When we talk about the aspects that companies explicitly manage, the first or dominant association in relation to children's rights is often the elimination of child labor. So companies are much more alert to their possible connection to children's rights in their upstream supply chain and in relation to their suppliers. In interviews, we learned that if a company has a policy, a zero tolerance policy on child labor, this is often a very good starting point, actually, to also take action. So we heard several times that having a policy leads to the establishment of additional processes, including the monitoring or provision of training for supply chain partners. Now, through this engagement, companies learn about the complexity of the issue and also about root causes and their relation in this broader context. And they will also start to go beyond tier one. And other examples that we heard are from companies that already engage with the communities in which they operate more holistically. And with this, I'm happy to hand over to Tulia Baldassari to hear what this can actually look like in practice. Now, Tulia is from Interholco and looks after the communication and marketing for the group. In this function, she is also responsible for sustainability and ESG-related reporting. For those of you who don't know the company so well, Interholco offers sustainable hardwood solutions made in Africa, and they produce logs and also further processed wood products. So they manage the entire supply chain from the forests to the customers and have experience for more than 60 years in this field. They have a very strong focus on sustainability, both ecologically and socially. So, Tulia, we look forward to hearing from you how you address children's rights in your operations, in particular, where do these topics come up, and also how you manage it. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Berit, for the presentation. Good morning, everyone. As Interholco, we're very proud. Switzerland hosts our headquarters. Switzerland is a country the world admires for the quality of its products and clockwork industrial processes. Now, this year marks our 60th anniversary, as correctly reported by Berit, and the trust in our brand tells us we have achieved joining Swiss quality with the exceptional natural properties of hardwood from the Republic of Congo. Our shareholders, stakeholders, and partners help us make sure we do so in a way that is safe for people, planet, and climate. We produce semi-finished products that we sell B2B to 500 customers in 40 countries. From a wood, a second forest is born, made of window frames, doors, decking for outdoor terraces, indoor flooring, garden furniture, carpentry. But for us, quality is products that address expectations and concerns. Our products are typically several meters in length, hundreds of kilos, no small parts that a child could ever either assemble or handle. Now, those products require heavy equipment, complex industrial machines, for instance, caterpillars. But we do not just content ourselves with saying, no children work with us, we certify it. In fact, we adopt legally binding standards in Europe as in Congo, such as the ILO conventions, excuse me, and core labor requirements, the European Union Timber Regulation, for instance, as well as the US Lacey Act. But we also take heed of so-called soft instruments, such as the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact, the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, along with the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. Now, Interholco upholds the principles of FSC certification, voluntary certification. This is the most demanding social, economic, and environmental standards currently available. Annual on-site audits verify on-site that our procedures are aligned with our deforestation-free and child-friendly policies. For example, just to give you an example, Interholco takes into account even, unfortunately, minor aspects, such as requiring that parental consent is given before even one photograph or one film is done with children that live in our forest concession. So quality for us is also products that are safe for children in Europe as in Africa. Interholco respects the Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions and uses no hazardous chemicals, for instance, glues, in the production of glued laminated scantlings, a high-performing product which is much sought after on the European markets especially, that we are proud to offer with technical certification as well as FSC certification, and which is entirely produced and transformed in Congo, adding value locally. Our due diligence process is certified by a control union and touches on all aspects required by the European Timber Regulation and the ILO core labor requirements. Interholco suppliers must respect the same engagements as Interholco. This is a sine qua non for us. So first and foremost, exclusion of child labor, zero tolerance there, then ecosystem protection, exclusion of hazardous materials, and so on and so forth. Of course, this entails precise procedures that second and third party audits must verify on site. Unless a supplier ticks all the boxes, no contract is even signed. But even after signing the contract, suppliers continue to be screened on site, so we can rest assured, all of us, Interholco as well as our customers and the end consumers, that they do respect their engagements. When a breach occurs, either it can be reasonably resolved in 3 months or the contract is instantly terminated, collaboration comes to an end. And quality for us is products that protect the future, children. The children's rights include the right to an education, to a safe environment, to safe food and clean drinking water, the right to grow and enjoy access to medical care. Interholco meets these needs by giving all its workers in Europe, as in Africa, the means to earn a living wage, not just a minimum wage. Interholco has been tasked by the Republic of Congo, owner of the forest concession that Interholco manages, to run essential medical facilities in the village of Ngombe, which is where the industrial site is located, along with a library, which is in fact the largest one in the region, in a region that really equals Belgium and Qatar, just to give you an idea of the surfaces that we are talking about. On top, Interholco gives access to electricity and clean drinking water for free to a population of 10,000 inhabitants. Not to mention the COVID-19 fundraiser Interholco had launched in 2020 to acquire life-saving equipment. The Interholco social team has regular meetings with 6,000 foreign inhabitants on top of the 10,000 inhabitants of Gombe, indigenous peoples whose children attend the school, which is called Wake Up, that Interholco built a few years ago already, liaising with UNICEF and WFP. Now, the latter provides meals for the school canteen, which is an incentive for children to go and attend school. They can learn to read and write, and the school offers courses that are adapted to their traditional customs, so they can maintain their indigenous identity. This being said, not everything can be checked. Let's face it. Are we sure that no children have been involved in producing the food we buy for our employees? And this takes me back to child labor, unfortunately, or the glue we use, or the safety equipment that we acquire for our employees, from the gloves they use, the work overalls, helmets, masks, ear protection, shoes, and so on and so forth. Now, in order to mitigate risk to the max, it would be vitally important to run awareness-raising campaigns amongst consumers. Yes, they can be the heroes that put an end to child labor. In the sense, they can really be the end users as consumers. Child labor is the hidden pandemic that should have been long eradicated. By demanding certified products, the tables could turn. Bottom-up and top-down support, of course, those two should go hand in hand, clearly. And markets should reward responsible operators, severely sanctioning child labor, which in turn would make it possible for children to enjoy all of the other rights that they are entitled to, just as everyone else of us. Certification could thus become mainstream on markets, a sine qua non if we really want children to thrive and not just survive. Now, that's the meaning we give to the word holistic. Over to you, Berit.
Great, thank you. I'm sure that we will get back to this in the Q&A after the presentation. Now, back to the key insights of our study. What are the top priorities that within the range of children's rights companies actually see for their operations? Now, we see that companies prioritize quite clearly 3 top priorities of the children's rights and business principles. First of all, not surprisingly, I guess, is the elimination of child labor. And then next, there are two priorities that both relate to safety standards. One is product safety, and the second is safety on site in companies' operations. Now, for the remaining children's rights and business principles, we find a much lower priority across industries. Now, as you can see on the graph on the right, there are three priorities that stand out, and for the rest, there is a much more mixed picture. So on the right-hand side, you will see the different children's rights and business principles. And we asked companies in the survey to rate these rights in the priority for their own operations. Now, this graph shows the priority ratings for a company's own operations, and we tested the same for the upstream supply chain, and the top three priorities are actually the same and even more pronounced for the upstream supply chain. So these are the safety aspects and the elimination of child labor. In our interviews, one corporate representative stated that the visibility is a main driver of the relevance and also for taking action for companies. So she concluded that it is important not to turn a blind eye on the issues that are not seen, but also that it's very important for companies to do the risk assessment, to get the data, and then to follow up on this. Now, for the next part of the key insights, I'm handing over to my colleague, Sarah Kremer.
Thanks, Berit. Yeah, key insights 4, 5, and 6, I'll be presenting those. So number 4 is about philanthropy. Most corporate activities in relation to children are philanthropic in nature. These activities focus mostly on providing for children. So for example, in the context of education, access to education or healthcare, and less on the two other groups of children's rights, protection of children, and participation of children. We'll give you more details on the next slide. In our study, 2/3 of the companies said that they support activities that benefit children, that explicitly benefit children, either financially or through their own projects. And sometimes we also see companies involving their own staff in corporate responsibility projects. Some of these activities are closely related to the core product or service that the company is offering. So for example, we've witnessed or observed a technology company donating mobile phones to developing countries, an industrial goods company donating tools and machinery for schools and training camps, or a pharmaceutical company providing medicine. Corporate philanthropy engagements are based both in the countries the company is based in. So basically here in this study, it's Switzerland or Liechtenstein, but also equally, if not a little bit even more, abroad. So Interholco's examples in Congo were one instance for activities abroad. Most companies engage in more than one philanthropic activity that benefits children, on average 2 to 3. And these activities are often undertaken in collaboration with expert organizations, both international and also local level. For example, UNICEF came up a lot during our desk research. Now, looking at the areas of philanthropic activities that corporations engage in that benefit children, you'll see this graph on the left, graph number 9. And even though it's at the very top, it's actually the top activity, and that's education. So that's the number 1 area for corporate philanthropic activities that benefit children. And this is education, or philanthropy in connection with education is also the only case where we have come across where companies mentioned a gender-based perspective. So for example, creating equal opportunity in accessing education and skills development. One example here was involving girls in scientific training, and also the educational activities, they focus on children's future employability. So for example, by offering vocational training or organizing events such as summer camps or trainings with certificates at the end, show evidencing participation in those activities. The other top 3 areas of voluntary activities that benefit children are humanitarian relief. So for example, the latest would be a company, for example, matching 100% of the funds provided to the Ukraine Relief Fund for children. Thirdly, promoting children's health. And to similar extent, 31% in fact in the survey, benefiting children via activities in connection with climate and the environment. So I want to move on to key insight number 5, and that basically asks the question, so what about integrating respect for children's rights into business models? What do companies do there? And the key insights reads, tools and management systems to implement children's rights in business, so through governance, through monitoring, remediation of children's rights issues. These tools and management systems require further development. We heard earlier from Birgit that if there is a policy, a management system to manage children's rights risks often follows. However, most companies only focus on a few aspects of children's rights in business, so primarily child labor at the supplier level, and management systems at best look into tier 1 because that's the visibility, that's the limited visibility only up to their own direct suppliers. And due to the limited transparency on their supply chains, it's almost impossible for companies in business to assess the real impact that they have on children. And some companies are aware of these limitations, and you'll see the quotes on the right side. So one interview partner put it as this. They said, yeah, we do the standard due diligence or the desktop assessment and the supplier selection when we're selecting our suppliers, who to work with, who to buy from, but that's not enough. We asked companies in the survey what factors would enable them to do more on children's rights in their company. And here on graph 17, you'll see that building knowledge and capacity around children's rights, in children's rights, through either collaborations with expert organizations and training of staff, the two of those were the top answers. So building knowledge and building capacity, and then followed by the need that companies have in terms of more funds and more staff dedicated specifically to address children's rights due diligence in the company. I'm going to turn back to Birgit because she will be introducing our next corporate contributor, and that's MCI Group. And then we'll take it from there with key insight 6.
Yeah, let's hear at this point a second corporate perspective, this time with a focus on the downstream value chain. So welcome, Erika. Let me briefly introduce you. Erika Fauer works for the MCI Group, and she is the Group Internal Communication Director. And in this role, she's also responsible for monitoring and communicating the sustainability performance. Now, MCI Group is a network of agencies that specializes in marketing, innovation, and event communication. They have experience in over 30 countries for more than 30 years now. Erika, I look forward to hearing from your experience with identifying children's rights issues that can come up, and also with setting up structures to prepare for these situations.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Birgit, for the intro and inviting me to share our approach on children's rights. So we've been a signatory of the UN Global Compact since 2007, so celebrating 15 years this year. And so I think like many of the signatories, we integrate the UN principle and the SDGs, so the Sustainable Development Goals, into our approach and throughout our business. So human rights and children's rights are included in our approach. So as per our code of conduct and business ethics, we aim to prevent, identify, and address negative impacts on human rights, including human trafficking and especially children's rights. So a few years back, we've done a risk assessment on generally human rights, but there were questions about children's rights for our own office operations as a service company, but also the potential risks on client projects. So within our offices operations, the risks are somewhat limited. You know, we're careful with the goods we purchase. By goods, I mean like gifts or merchandise or office materials. So we do our due diligence, checking how and where they are produced. One thing that came up is about trainees. So we have a lot of trainees because its purpose is also to educate the future event managers. And so not sure if you're aware, but in the event industry, we work long hours with many events taking place in the evenings or over the weekends. So we had to, we have to ensure that for our trainees, that they get breaks and that we give them also sufficient rest time. Regarding client events, so we know that the hospitality and event industries can face human rights abuses, modern slavery. This is especially to do around like exhibition management or temporary construction, like typically where the supplier needs to hire more staff to provide services, and sometimes shortage of staff, and they're taking some shortcuts and not doing due diligence in terms of how they hire and who they hire to do the work. We also know that large citywide conferences or public events can attract sex traffickers. So that's a fact. So usually these risks are indirect for us, but we still have a role to play by asking the right questions and do our due diligence. So like many other corporations struggling to assess all the suppliers. So just to give you an idea, we run over 5,000 projects a year. So it's in-person events or online. And so we contract in average about 25 suppliers worldwide per year. So it's impossible to fully assess all the suppliers, but we do more in-depth assessment for some of the bigger suppliers or the ones we contract on a regular basis. In any case, all the suppliers need to sign our supplier code of conduct, which sets our minimum expectations. And of course, we covered as a chapter on child and forced labor. So we also have a unique advantage is that we have local offices that can be our ears and eyes on site. So if the event is taking place in a country where we have an office, then we have this advantage that if we have any doubt, we're uncertain about some supplier, they can go and physically visit and have a conversation with the suppliers. We also created our own event and safety and sustainability assessment tool. So it's once a project manager has entered all the event details, like the number of participants, the destination, the type of attendees, it will activate a certain number of questions or actions that need to be taken. So for example, if we have children attending the event, so there's a set of questions that will open about extra safety that needs to be taken, that the food is appropriate, if alcohol is served, how we're going to manage this, or do we need a nurse or a doctor on site, depending on the number of participants, voice level, if there's music, and these kind of things. We also provide training for our project managers on ethical purchasing. So what to check, the questions to ask. We basically know where there are potential risks. So we're careful on specific things that we purchase. We're raising awareness also how to recognize the signs if somebody is held against their will, what to do about it, or even having to say no to a client because they want us to purchase some goods or work with specific suppliers, and we have doubts about the work ethics of the supplier. So as I mentioned earlier, our industry is also facing human rights, but there are encouraging signs from the industry, from the larger hotel chains like Marriott and Hilton, or professional associations. They have put stop human trafficking at the top of their priority. So they create code of conducts, raising awareness and providing training. So like you mentioned before, it's true that we focus more on not using children to produce products or goods that we contract for our clients. And so we think our processes are effective today, but of course we always remain open and willing to adapt and improve. But for me, I think also it's about our company culture, which is about caring and being responsible about doing what is right. Sorry. So there's a saying I like, which is if you see something, say something. It could be wrong, and that's okay. It could be right and save a life. And I think ultimately that's what we ask from all our employees: is to be aware and keep an eye open. So I hope this was useful to you. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, let's come to the final insight of the report. And that's about due diligence legislation. So existing and emerging due diligence legislations raise companies' awareness for children's rights and create momentum for children's rights in business. So 2 examples of such mandatory human rights due diligence laws are the Swiss conflict minerals and child labor due diligence legislation, which entered into force earlier this year. And I saw there is a question about that already in the chat. And the second one is the currently at draft level EU Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence, for which the EU Commission published a draft, I think, in February this year. In our study, more than half of the companies expect that these mandatory human rights due diligence legislations will increase the relevance of children's rights for their specific company. And you see that in graph 8 on the left side, with 55% of the companies in our surveys responding either yes, it will increase the relevance significantly or relatively. While companies find that there is lack of clarity around the exact requirements that are expected of companies, of them, under these laws, and they find this challenging, they're nevertheless acting. In fact, many interview partners report that because of the new legislation in Switzerland, that they're either assessing, currently reassessing, or starting to assess their due diligence processes for children's rights. These laws are an opportunity to advance children's rights in business. They create momentum, and as one interview partner put it, and you'll see it, I think, on the right side, they have more weight than a voluntary international standard. So suppliers of these companies are less likely to push back if they're required by law to implement new processes in their own companies. Now, some companies go beyond these mandatory human rights due diligence laws. They believe that for a truly effective implementation of respect for children's rights in business, in a company, what's really necessary is a transformation of corporate behavior, having an internal reflection on how business impacts children's rights and human rights in general, of course, and a change of the approach. So some companies acknowledge that they have to move from a compliance-based and the so-called ticking the box approach to a more holistic understanding of how business impacts people and specifically children's rights, and looking at the root causes of children's rights issues, and then adopting a different risk management approach, not risk to company, but risk to children, risk to people lens. I think that brings me to the end of the 6 key insights, and I'm going to turn back to my colleague Birgit to wrap up the presentation of our findings.
Great, thanks a lot, Sarah. So now, to close the presentation of the findings of our study, here you can see an overview of all the findings again. So this is a preview from the report, and we are delighted to share the report with you this week. You will receive a follow-up email after this event and receive the report. If you have further questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll also have time for questions at the end of the sessions in a few minutes. So for now, thank you. I'm handing over to Monica again.
Thank you so much, Berit, and also Sarah and Dorothy for your presentation. I think even already knowing the report, I found it really insightful. And thank you also to Tulia Baldassari and Erika Fauver for your inputs and for your very practical and I think also very useful and inspirational insights into your daily work that you do on and for children's rights. I saw that there are already some questions in the chat, but would suggest to take them up in the Q&A session that we will have shortly afterwards. We will then directly go over to the outlook. And now that we have learned more about priorities, challenges, activities of companies when it comes to children's rights, what do we do with it? And what is maybe also already in the pipeline in Switzerland and Liechtenstein in terms of next steps on business and children's rights. And I would first like to directly hand over to Miriam Ait-Yahya, advisor at the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, And she will inform us on the current state and planning of the business exchange group on child labor due diligence. Miriam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Monica. So I will share my screen and show you a short presentation about a project that we are planning about an exchange group on child labor due diligence for Swiss businesses. I just want to confirm, can you see the slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you so much. So I will start with some words about the context that you probably know well. We have talked earlier about the new legislation that came into force in January of this year. It includes a due diligence obligation on child labor. It applies to companies that offer goods or services for which there is a well-founded suspicion of child labor. And the obligations start in 2023. That means that companies will have to publish their first report in 2024 about 2023. The implementation of the Swiss legislation is a responsibility of the private sector. However, the Swiss government supports the companies in the field of human rights due diligence through the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. The main activities are the creation of support measures such as tools, guidelines, etc., and awareness raising activities for Swiss companies. So in this context, we are planning a project. It will take the form of a temporary exchange group for Swiss businesses on the topic of child labor due diligence. It will enable a peer learning and an open discussion on practical questions around the implementation of international instruments related to child labor due diligence. The project will offer the opportunity to learn from champion companies and experts from the International Labour Organization, the ILO. The group will run for 1 year with approximately 4 group sessions. We're planning to start in November this year. And in order to benefit from the program, we will ask the companies to be willing to share good practices and challenges on tackling child labor in their supply chains. This is important, and I want to stress it. The project will not offer interpretation of the Swiss legislation. The discussion will focus on the implementation of international instruments. We have 2 partners for this project. First of all, the Child Labor Platform. It's a leading business initiative to eradicate child labor in supply chains. The International Labour Organization plays the role of the secretariat, and the Swiss group that we are planning will take place under the umbrella of the Child Labor Platform. We will offer a privileged access to the Child Labor Platform's activities to the participants of the Swiss group. Our other partner is the Global Compact Network, Switzerland and Liechtenstein, that you know well. I don't think I have to present it. However, I want to inform that the Global Compact Network will be the secretariat of the Swiss group and will ensure the contact with the interested enterprises. So now you maybe ask yourself why I'm presenting this project at the present event. Monica made a link, but there is another link, namely those who have participated to the online survey of the University of Geneva may remember that some questions were about a possible exchange group for Swiss businesses. And we have indeed worked together with Global Compact to incorporate some questions in the survey that help us inform, orient, guide our project, and get a sense of the interest and needs. In the survey, the participants had the possibility to share their contact if they wished to receive more information. And the University of Geneva will contact those participants soon to ask if their email address can be shared with the Global Compact, so that we can then share you more information. Or even easier and faster, if you're interested, you can also send an email to info@globalcompact.ch. So I want to thank the whole study team for the great collaboration and also for the invitation to this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for this brief insight. I'm sure this will be a very helpful opportunity for companies to exchange on upcoming legislation, but also other issues of concern to them in the next month and years. So thank you very much. Also from our side, great that this cooperation for the survey, etc., could take place, and that you are presenting here. Thank you. I will directly hand over to Alice Harbach-Forel from the Global Compact Network to give us a brief input on another workshop webinar series that we are planning. Alice, directly over to you for more information.
Do you see my screen? Yes, okay. So good morning, everyone. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So as Monica said, I'm Alice. I'm leading the programs at the Global Compact Network Switzerland and Liechtenstein. So as my colleagues have mentioned before, we did commission this study to be able to support companies better in the implementation of children's rights. And beside our involvement in the just mentioned exchange group for businesses, we plan together with UNICEF and Save the Children an event series on child rights and business. So under the claim, understanding and managing your company's impact on children, we will be holding and conducting a multi-part series that will take place in 2022 and 2023. So what we aim with this series is to raise awareness among companies on the topic of children's rights and business, and this going beyond the issue of child labor. So as we have heard many times today, child labor is very much in the focus, and it's also a very big problem in this field, but companies have impacts also on other parts of children's lives. So another objective we do follow is to provide concrete support and identify areas of action for companies to understand and manage their impacts. So we will have the workshops that will be very practical with case studies and with helps and guidelines from the relevant organizations. And we also would like to expand the network of company representatives who are interested in and committed to children's rights. So we will start our first event in collaboration with UNICEF and Save the Children on Thursday, 10th of November. We haven't decided on the exact format yet. Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be online? We will ask you this question in a few minutes. Just about the event. So we will start with the event on child labor and how businesses can protect children in their value chains. I have just said that we want to go beyond child labor, and now I say we start with child labor. So it's we want to profit from the momentum now. We know the new ordinance is coming in all the companies. We have seen that this topic is one of the highest priorities for the companies. So this is why we start with the topic of child labor. And we will also have the next events on other topics. So if you, again, like Miriam said before, for the exchange group, the same applies for this event series. You can have further information by writing an email to info@globalcompact.ch. And anyway, we will send follow-up email in the following days, but we will also inform you as soon as we have more information. So with this, I would like to thank you all, and also a big thank you to the project team and to Monica for the great work and collaboration, and also to the companies that gave us the great insights today. So now I'm handing over to Antonio for the closing remarks, and then Bettina, and then we will have the Q&A. We thought we do the closing remarks before the Q&A so that if someone needs to leave, they will have heard everything.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for these results. I have seen a lot of challenges still awaiting for us. I won't go into the details. I think they're on the table now. For me, it's clear it's the start, or some kind of an in-between stop where we see where we stay in our context. And for me, it's clear children's rights must be much more in a focus for us as local network here in collaboration with all of you. That's for me the main finding of today's presentation. Including sensibilization within the private sector, within other areas, and really looking forward for collaboration. Just one remark, I realized we have a cooperation with the local network Ukraine and Bangladesh. We will have one most probably with Kenya and or Rwanda, where these issues become even more relevant. So I see also an opportunity maybe to continue this collaboration above Switzerland in midterm with other local networks and other interested partners in our networks, including ÖBU, etc. So yeah, that's for me the main result. And again, thanks a lot for the study. I think it's for us really helpful intermediate term instrument to continue.
Thank you very much, Antonio. Thank you, everyone. This was so inspiring. And I mean, I read the study, but today I even learned some more aspects of it. So thank you very much for that. I have, my three takeaways are: there is a strong need, there's a strong need for legislation. Legislation is the driver for companies to set up policies, processes, and monitoring systems. And it creates a level playing field for everyone, for all companies, and strengthens the awareness for human and children's rights issues. So that's a very strong lever. Secondly, participation of children is very low. I mean, children are those who know their own situation and their surrounding the best, and they could provide insights and input, but they are not involved and heard as they probably should. And thirdly, the awareness raising and the support is key. I mean, there is within the private sector there are many different levels of awareness for the different aspects of children's rights in business. That's basically my third learning when I read the study, and also today. But I don't want to speak any longer because we have some questions already in the chat, and I'm sure you would like to ask some more. So I'm happy to hand over back to you, Alice, with a big, big thank you for everyone.
Thank you.